Hello right bags, it's Jade Plays Games with another Dayz How to Survive video. Today we're starting our journey at looking at every location in Dayz. The major ones, the hidden ones, the secret ones, the ones that are going to give you the most loot, or the ones that you're going to come across the most. Is it worth it hunting out these places? Is it worth it patrolling them, going through? Starting off with obviously the biggest one you'll probably come to find, ELECTRO. Situated south of Chernarus, it's not the largest city on the map, but it is one of the closest ones to your spawn point, particularly if you do spawn on the south coast. So on that basis, ELECTRO should be something possibly you would avoid, but of course Dayz is really difficult. You need to get some food and water from somewhere before you start venturing inland more or go towards north. But it doesn't mean ELECTRO's completely useless. Like I said, go around, scrabble up, find yourself some food and water. Despite the town being fairly small compared to some of the other cities, there is still a bunch of good loot to be had. There are some main locations including 2 fire stations, a hospital, a church, a factory, a power plant, a police station, as well as some other office buildings. Keeping the water to your left and the railroad to your right, if you spawn, head up towards ELECTRO, but make sure you stay along the coastline. Looking out for upturned boats, you'll often find food underneath them. So even if you can't see any items, make sure you check underneath them boats. If you're here at this point, you're going to be going in towards the docks, entering the city this way. This is a good find sometimes, particularly if the server's just respawned. You can find some automatic rifles, sometimes in the cranes, and few items in the offices. Unfortunately, a lot of these containers will not open. You'll be lucky if you get 1 or 2 actually manage to open. It's one of the biggest problems I have with Dayz. I really do wish they would make the containers that open a certain colour, just to give everyone a little bit of a little head start. Once you've cleared the dock area, you will start your approach into the full main city. There is the railroad to your right hand side and a few extra outhouse buildings. It may be worth checking them out, but I've never really come across any outstanding loot. What we're going to be aiming for is checking out the key locations: the hospital, the police station, the fire stations, and maybe the factory. Of course, because ELECTRO is a starting city, you're often going to come across other noobs starting out, so make sure you've got a weapon in your hand always, particularly a good melee weapon. You may want to hide the fact if you've got any other items. If you do come across lots of noobs, their likelihood is they're going to probably try to avoid you, unless they really want to kill you and eat you. Other more experienced players probably won't be venturing this far south, unless they really want to toy or muck around with some survivors. At this point in the game, you really should just be concentrating on finding food and water and not worrying too much about items or equipment unless it's really going to be beneficial, like a bag. ELECTRO really is a starting point for noobs, so the idea that someone's going to kill you and take all your hard-earned stuff is probably not that important. Just make sure you get to explore the areas. Now we're going along the side here. This is the entrance point I like the most. Rather than coming up the main road, I go around the outskirts of the town and then we get into it. And it's the usual: loot every single building you can find. Even if the server is about to restart in an hour, you'll still find there's lots of spots that players have missed. You can get lots of decent cans of food and water, particularly in some of the office buildings, and like I said, we're going to check out the main hub points. If you're a bit desperate for some water at this point, you can see this red building on my left hand side. Go down that road and just behind that red building or garden over, you will find a water pump. Head along the main street and we'll start to come across places like the police station and eventually the hospital. There are an absolute shed ton of zombies that spawn in this town, so be very careful. Obviously keep an eyes peeled always. Pretty much the centre of the town, you'll come across a checkpoint. If you're very lucky, you may find still some army supplies, particularly bags or combat trousers. Like I said, you can get really lucky sometimes and find some good army supplies, and particularly rifles and guns, usually an M4 in this tent area. Now, general tip for any scaffolding, but never neglect it. Usually there is something at the top of the scaffolding. A hard hat, some nails, some gaffer tape. There's usually something quite useful, so always give a check and make sure you've looked these over. Now, away from the main square and particularly on the road out of the town towards the west, you will come across the police station. There's lots of police stations all over Dayz, the Chernarus map. However, they are still one of the best ways to get yourself a decent gun and hopefully, if you're very lucky, some ammo. So always make sure you check it. But be warned, it's obviously a hub area for everyone to go and check out, as they are thinking there's going to have some guns and weapons. If the server's been live a while, the chance of you finding a firearm and some ammunition is pretty rare, but it does also give you a good opportunity to get high and take a look at the surrounding area. Just don't poke your head on the rooftop completely, otherwise you may get sniped if there is anyone looking just for some fresh kills. If you keep heading west out of the town, you'll eventually come across the fire station on your right and the train station on your left. Now the fire station is really useful for getting yourself some fire gear. If you really like it, you'll get yourself a helmet, and particularly the fire coat and the fire trousers are pretty damn useful. You'll also find a map at the train station that I just went past there to give yourself a bit of an orientation and find out exactly where you are if you're still getting used to Dayz. You can see from this video footage I am starting to die because I haven't managed to find any food yet. I've not been that efficient at checking every single building because I didn't want to attract too many zombies. However, you can pretty much guarantee you'll find at least some food and some water if you just keep persisting. You'd have to be really unlucky to search this whole town and not find anything to eat or drink. Don't forget the roofs as well. If you have searched through the fire station but you can't find anything inside, there's often lots of items on the rooftops. There's a ladder outside the fire station that leads to the rooftop. If you keep going west, you're going to come across one of the office blocks or the apartment blocks, and then also you'll come across the exit of ELECTRO. But you maybe want to head a bit more north into town, a little bit more the outskirts. This is where you'll find the factory as well as the hospital. You'll know you're going north because the road starts to go uphill, and you should see the apartment blocks on your right hand side as well as another large power plant. You can also dimly see in the distance on the hill a church too. I think it goes without saying that the apartment blocks are terrible places to loot. Despite the amount of rooms that are inside, there often is not much there. They are really only good for losing people on your trail. There's so many buildings. If you're looking to ambush someone, maybe you've got limited shots and you really need to make that shot count, laying in wait in one of the rooms or making them play hide and seek with you is probably your best bet. Now the power plant itself is pretty much the only real power plant in Chernarus, and it does house the second fire station, so it is worth checking out on the left hand side, but you probably won't find much in the way of food. It's going to be more equipment items and equipment for yourself, like I said, with the fire gear and the fire station being situated with it as well. I'm doubling back now and heading towards the centre of town again, and will hopefully come across the hospital. There are a few big yards in here as well that offer quite a bit of loot, particularly with lots of garages, so it's always worth checking out these places. In the surrounding areas you will find lots of chickens, sometimes bunny rabbits, and there are pigs on the eastern approach as you come into the city on the right hand side of the road and the railway tracks. Now, keeping the power plant to your left and the bulk of the city to your right, you will come across a dirt little road. This leads up to a little tiny row of houses. It's not that remarkable, but on the hill to the right is where the church is. Now, the church doesn't really offer too much, but if you feel like you really need to pray to God in Chernarus, then you can head up that hill on the right and you will find the church. Hallelujah. Oh, totally doing a thumbnail saying we're going to church. Boom. Done. Well, this is the church. Oh, and churches answer my prayers with more liquid refreshment. I knew Jesus was good for something. Right, we're going to have that. Just make sure you never blaspheme in church, otherwise God will troll you. Oh, that sucks. That's like the worst troll ever. Jesus, you trolled me! You trolled me with your sprite. You bastard. If you exit the church and head to your right, you will also notice there's a little graveyard on your left, but we're going to be heading back into town and taking a look at some of the other things that we may have missed on our circular route around ELECTRO. When you come back onto the road, you'll notice you're on the eastern approach into the city, and we're back at that red building which has the water pump. By this point, you may have found it actually hard to find any more water pumps. There's only another two that I have found in the city. One located just a bit more west of the police station and one much further north towards the power station. So make sure you get your water filled up and any pet bottles you may have found or cooking pots. And after that, that is pretty much it for ELECTRO. You will obviously have gone through the hospital, which is on the main square, or it should be, and this is where you're going to find lots of bandages, maybe some antibiotics and some painkillers hopefully. Now from here you've only really got two viable choices. You can either keep going west and hopefully hit the next big town, which I do believe is Berezino, or you can go north and venture much further inland, depending on how much food you've got. If you've picked up 2 cans of food, or maybe you've got some chicken fillets from killing some chickens, and at least 2 pet bottles, then I do reckon you should probably go much further north. If you go to Berezino, you're going to come across much more resistance. There's going to be a lot more players in that area. So if you want a more relaxed approach to Dayz and getting your grips with things, make sure you head north. There's a few different trails you can take. You can follow the green signposted trail that kind of meanders through the hills, or you can take the main road north. That's probably going to be your best bet if you really want to get inland quickly. If you decide to go west, you will come across more factories. These are right on the coastal area, and this is a fresh spawn area as well. There are lots of players that will spawn in this location, so be careful. Make sure you've got a melee weapon equipped for them fresh spawns, or even be prepared for the fact they may have found themselves a firearm. ELECTRO is not the city of dreams, but it is a good spot for a brand new player to Dayz to go and check out and get used to what a town is like without too much worry about losing hard earned gear or items, as you're normally a fresh spawn. For more experienced players, it will be somewhere that you quickly just go to get some food and water and then move on to Berezino, or like I said, you're going to move north to get better gear and better items. It all just depends though. If the server's just reset and you know it's got lots of fresh loot, it may be worth stocking up on, but be warned. The fresh spawns, the survivors that also spawn in these areas, are going to make your life a lot more difficult. That one consoling feature is that you won't find too many high level players venturing this far south just to come and kill survivors, unless they're really bored. As you leave ELECTRO, there is another dock area on the left hand side, a harbour with a small endpoint. Again, there's not really much going on here as lots of containers are closed off, but certainly it's a good road to follow, keeping yourself on the coastal lines so that you can pick up even more resources from the boats when you're trying to hit Berezino. And that is about it for ELECTRO. Go to the police station, check out the hospital, go around the power plants, and then get yourself out of ELECTRO as fast as possible once you've got some food and water. I am Jade Plays Games. I'm going to be doing much more in-depth tutorials and guides on Dayz, particularly looking out the big towns, the big cities, and some of the best locations for loot. Make sure you subscribed. Make sure you've come and joined my Discord, where we have a fantastic channel of Dayz survivors looking for players and friendlies. So, if you are a friendly in Chernarus, come and join us, but stay away from me, because I will betray you. I'm Jade Plays Games. I'll see you ratbags for another Dayz video very soon.